So I think that we can start. Philippe, what do you say? We can start.
Okay, thank you very much, Tassos, for your very kind words. Yeah, indeed, I should present myself very shortly. Well, so I'm Philippe Covillier. I'm working since more than 32 years at the European Commission, but I've been actually involved in research before at the time. My times at the Commission it was more in environmental chemistry, it was marine science. But I've been also working 10 years in what was called the Standard Measurements and Testing Program, which was a program in support of research in support of standardization in different fields. It was in the environment field in this case. And I've been involved in water policy making during 6 years. So I've been in charge of one of the daughter directives of the Water Framework Directive. So I've mixed, in fact, the two research and policy side. And since I'm working now at the Secure Society program, I'm facing with other type of issues related to standardization, not really the core work of standardization, but the way policymakers and practitioners are actually considering standardization, which makes me actually understand more I go, more I find it messy. More I find it complex. You know, it's like Greek philosopher would say that indeed more you know, less you know. Actually, more I know, more I find it complex. So I will try to tell you, in fact, what I feel and how we are proceeding, trying to simplify the overall process. First of all, when discussing with different type of actors, we see a clear I would say dichotomy between the standardization versus harmonization, and you certainly know that in your project, where people very often make a confusion between the word standardization, which is related to standard development in a standardization organization like CENELEC or ISO, and harmonization, which is a kind of soft standardization, which is not actually prone to formal, I would say, adoption of standard. And very often when you speak about practitioners, when they speak about standard operating procedure, they speak about standards, but these are not standards. They are harmonized protocols related to operational issues. And this is already creating a lot of confusion, because many people think that they need standardization, while what they are speaking about is harmonization, soft, I would say, harmonization, which can be prone to different ways of working together, but not necessarily running into the formal process of standardization. So I think that I've learned a lot in the issue of indeed interoperability of tools, technologies, many different issues which require standardization. This is absolutely for sure. But for many instances where you speak about operational strategies, for example, while practitioners are not necessarily willing to have a standardized protocol. They say that they want harmonization, they want to test their protocol, but not necessarily having formal standards. So we have been discussing that in the last years. We know that when you are dealing with tools and technologies, standardization is indeed, I would say, bringing interoperability, but it also open the market dimension as well. So I'm in charge of a research program related to disaster resilient society. And I wish that indeed the tools and technologies that are linked, for example, to water technologies can be indeed, I would say, prone to go to the market, and standardization in one of the components that is to be considered. So but when I discuss then with researchers and industry, it is a kind of message that I have. If I discuss with practitioners, they will tell me, no, we don't need standardization. If we want to have, for example, management planning, and so on, it's so different from one country to another, sometimes from one region to another, that we cannot standardize. So it's a little bit, already confusing when you are actually discussing with professionals. So research is as essential to actually provide a background for designing new standards. That is really when you need to have the development of new items. It can be tools, methods, whatever. So we are actually very keen to fund research which is, I would say, upstream part of standardization, pre-normative research. But we are also willing to fund research when you have well-identified items that are actually prone to standardization that needs a kind of validation, a demonstration. So we speak here about co-normative research. So for us, this is our, I would say, remit regarding what we can do as Secure Society program. But we are not entering into standardization itself. Standardization is very often identified by different sectors, and we are mandating via DG GROW, and Philippe worked in this Directorate General, providing a mandate to send, but this is not anymore research. It is really a funding of activities related to standardization. When I was a water policy maker, I did that for some monitoring tools that were needed for quality measurements related to the Water Framework Directive. And it went from DG Environment. A mandate was provided to send via what was called the DG Enterprise. So already this kind of process is indeed in place, but we are not ourselves as Commission. We do not have the mandate to run standardization. We are providing a mandate to a certain technical committee at CEN. When you speak about research, it's actually what we where our action is relevant is when there is in fact a request for different stakeholders, different even CEN, on providing background that will enable these mandates to be established, and standards that are well recognized, research that provide actually a background for developing standards. But we will, our role as a research program will stop here. We'll not provide a mandate further. So we had actually in 2013, we wanted to have an analysis of research and gaps through a mandate given to CEN, which was called the mandate M487 mandate, which gave a lot of different, I would say, needs, identified needs. And from this, we realized that policymakers and practitioners had not been really consulted at that time. So I wished, when I took this on board, I wished to contact the policymakers, ask, well, is this corresponding to what you wished with respect to standardization? And it has been shrunk to a small number of items, mostly related to CBRN issue, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear aspects, one of which was related to water. And in this respect, the UNCIP, and I know that you will have a presentation on that this morning, had a working group on a water security plan, which was actually matching in a way the water safety plan related to the Drinking Water Directive. But so this is quite logical in a way because the threats are completely different. We had several projects, for example, Resistant, and now a project called in Horizon 2020 Strategy, to continue to work on these research gaps and trying to ensure that policymakers and practitioners are being involved. aqua3S is one of the specific projects that were, I would say, identified as a need to look at the use of current sensor technologies that are used for safety purposes to be adapted for security. And why is it so? It's because UNCIP has indeed developed a water security plan, which was discussed at DG Environment, and it was a kind of big snow in a pond. You know, it was something which was not expected by DG Environment at the time of the revision of the Drinking Water Directive. And why? It's because security is not actually part of the Drinking Water Directive. So we are dealing with environmental law, safety, and when you deal with security, this is a different animal. We are not speaking anymore about environmental ministries or agencies. We are speaking about Ministry of Interior, and they are not necessarily working together. So there were some difficulties in this respect because many stakeholders thought that we wanted to, I would say, regulate water security within the Drinking Water Directive, which was absolutely not the case. It's absolutely not the case. It's only that we wanted to ensure that the sensors networks that are in place for safety could also be used and, I would say, coordinated with security related sensors. So what happened in the last years is that the word security has appeared in the memorandum of the Drinking Water Directive, but not as actually, I would say, legally binding requirement. And we are there at that time. So aqua3S is arriving to a situation where we know from the work of UNTITLed that we need to do more related to current sensor technologies that could be adapted and linked with the water safety network. But there is absolutely no regulatory discussions for the time being on that. Absolutely not. Regarding standardization, we need to be extra sure that we will both look at a good connection with the actual water safety regulations and the security regulations. So I will be able to help you in this respect, knowing that the ground is very, very a little bit moving ground, and that we are entering into issues that are of classified character. So here, regarding standardization, it is an additional difficulty that we cannot develop a standard with a classified component. So we need to find a way to ensure that we may have a general, I would say, standard part which is public, but some classified part which are not public, which are related to ministerial material. This was a very short introduction, just to confuse maybe a little bit the debate, but it's really exactly the situation in which we are finding. We are willing to help in Horizon Europe, and frankly speaking, I don't think that we have a mechanism that enables us to identify clearly the standardization needs related to security, so in research. So in Horizon Europe, I've put actually a coordination support action to establish this mechanism, because when we will have this, we will be able to identify topics that are very specific. aqua3S is one of the very, very few specific topics that was identified under Horizon 2020. So you are quite a specific animal. Other projects are more general. I wish in the future to be able to have a mechanism enabling us to identify these specific topics corresponding to well-identified needs, which is not yet the case. So you are actually a very important topics for us, very important project, and I will be very happy to help as far as I can. And the floor back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philippe, for this excellent introduction and setting the scene, I would say. And yes, exactly. In aqua3S, we are trying to, from one hand, to have these typical DRS projects. That means pilots, new technologies, integration, collaboration, and so on. And from the other hand, we have to focus on the standardization part, which is, from one hand, the safety standardization of drinking water, which is somehow established, and the security sector, which is another sector, totally different. So this is very challenging and very, very interesting. And I think that this distinction between harmonization and standardization that you mentioned is very critical, because most of the times we are doing harmonization, we're trying to do, and what you said, that the practitioners are usually more focused on the harmonization part and not on the standardization part, because they don't want to focus on technical details and so on standards. And I think that we have seen this also in the other sectors of DRS, like the fires, the flood. So they try to have a bit broad policies, but not standards. So then we have Francesca from AVA, and they are more related to policies rather than standards. Especially what you mentioned about the countries that have different approaches on this. So each country follows different standards, policies, mixed standards and policies. So this is also very, very critical regarding the pilots that we are designing and the evaluation, because in this project we have pilots from 6 different countries. So we have already identified different needs, different technologies, different level of technology readiness. So other countries are more with sensors, more with laboratories, other countries are less prepared, and so on. And finally, this part that you mentioned, that we have the classified part and the public part, is very interesting and important to us, because in aqua3S, we have several technologies that are considered as classified, but they need input from public tasks. So it's a very, thin line between what is public, what is classified, which data can be public, which data can be classified, which alerts are public, which alerts are classified. So thank you very much for this very, very interesting talk. And I think that now it's, this talk actually provides us all the necessary ground to discuss all the necessary aspects. I don't know if there is any question from anybody that you would like to ask Philippe.
I was confused enough, I was sufficiently confusing that.
Quite the opposite.
Okay, so Tazos, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you very much, Philippe. I will try now to make a short introduction to aqua3S and what we have done so far, because I think that, let me share my screen. I am a more traditional with the slides, Okay, so all right, here. Okay, so the challenge. It is a typical challenge that we have in the DRS sector. Disasters led to problems in the societies, and we have to consider risk reduction measures. Drinking water is one of the main sources of risk regarding safety and security. Several technologies have been proposed all these years, but there is a gap. We had identified back then during the proposal preparation, there is a gap on how to integrate the new solutions, whatever the solutions are, from simple monitoring sensors to more innovative, beyond state-of-the-art technologies, to existing water safety networks. So aqua3S combines novel technologies in water safety and security, aiming to standardize existing sensor technologies complemented by state-of-the-art detection mechanisms. So you see the three different parts of aqua3S. So we have a series of state-of-the-art and beyond state-of-the-art technological achievements of several fields like sensors, Internet of Things, semantic reasoning, decision support systems, and so on. And additionally, with two new innovative sensors that we are developing in the project, together with some other sensing technologies like visual analysis from UAVs, Earth observation data, satellite images, in order to detect and evaluate harmful substances. So the data obtained from aqua3S sensor networks, together with the data that we have from the existing infrastructure of the utility networks, we process them with some threat detection algorithms and high-level multimodal fusion techniques in order to support several types of practitioners, water authorities, water utilities, medical sectors, other types of first responders, providing tools like early warning and decision support systems. Here you can see a high-level architecture of the system. So you imagine that we have several sensing solutions like UAVs, Earth observation, satellite data from satellite data here. We have image analysis from rivers. We have different type of sensors over here. And also we have input from social media, which is a very hot topic the last 5 years in the disaster in the DRS sector. And all this stuff, all this input is analyzed and trying to make this meaningful through specific visual analytics and interfaces to the authorities, to the water authorities, to the water utilities, and so on. So this is more or less the idea of aqua3S. And the objectives is, first of all, to create strategies and methods in order a water facility to easily integrate solutions regarding water safety. So the idea here is that we are a water authority, a water utility in Greece. There are some new innovative solutions, and we would like to integrate them in our system. How we are going to do it, how we are going to test them, how we are going to evaluate them, how we are going to be sure that this is working and what we have integrated is working, how we are going to be sure that this affects to the water security, this affects also to the water safety. Then these objectives actually have the base, and these allow easy engagement of different authorities in water-related crises and introduce a bottom-up approaches as citizen mapping initiatives in order to have large databases. So from one hand, we have the authorities and the involvement of the citizens. Then the second pillar of the objectives has to do with these innovative sensors, also with the methods to estimate the resilience level, the model and classify of a crisis event, some very innovative early warning methods, and then a complex collaborative system in which actually the authorities can predict what is going to happen in specific conditions regarding a disaster and a crisis incident. So again, here you can see how the objectives are based on this high-level architecture. So we have the data acquisition from UAVs and Earth observation data, the social monitoring, together with the sensor and IoT solutions. Then we have the analysis level with the semantic enrichment, with the data fusion and early warning. Then the social interaction with the citizens, and all these during the operational timeline of the project results to the water safety and the water security through reporting, visualization, DSS components. The pilots. So we are very, very happy and glad that we have in aqua3S different pilots in different countries. So we have pilots in Italy, 2 pilots in Bulgaria, 1 pilot in Cyprus, 1 pilot in Greece, especially in Thessaloniki. And you all understand why Thessaloniki is very important to aqua3S, because CERT-WE coordinators are located in Thessaloniki. So the first pilot that we should have is one of the most important pilots is to have the water safety and security in Thessaloniki. We have the pilot in France with Suez, and of course the pilot in Brussels with Vivaqua. And here you can see that we have done the first prototype pilots, unfortunately remote pilots, but it was very interesting and with great results pilots. I will present some of these later. There were excellent pilots, and now we are ready to move to the second prototype pilots. Hopefully, as we continue from September, I think that traveling will be allowed again, so we will be able to have proper field pilots in aqua3S. Here you can see the pilots. The pilots are based on real incidents, real needs. So for example, we have the transboundary pollution in Trieste. We have the problem in Aliakmonas River in Thessaloniki. We have all the hydraulic functionality and diffusion support system in Paris with Suez. We have the contamination in Lemessos in Cyprus, and we have some pollution events in Brussels, and at the same time, some incidents in 2 places in Bulgaria. And the valuation of the system is based on prototype and final system evaluation, user-oriented evaluation with end users, external reviewers, and user group. Here now you can see that, let's go to the previous one. Here you can see what I described previously. aqua3S is, from one hand, the typical DRS project. Usually in the DRS projects, we have some innovative solutions, some new methods regarding the disaster resilience response and so on. We have methods, we have solutions, we have new approaches, we have training, we have learning. And all these solutions are based and should be evaluated in field trials, in field pilots. This is what we also do in aqua3S. So aqua3S is primarily a DRS project that follows the same approach. So we develop new solutions, technologies, and so on, and we test them through field and tabletop exercises. However, aqua3S should also include this very close connection to the policy level and also to the standardization level. And now that's why this workshop is done. We are doing this workshop at this moment, is to establish all the necessary connections with the standardization domain together with the policy domain. So that's what I said is not just a DRS, but a step beyond DRS. So the typical, we are trying right from the beginning of the project to think the exploitation of the solution. And what Philippe mentioned before is very interesting about the part of the standardization of aqua3S will be also an exploitable component, exploitable solution from the project, which is very interesting for us, not just because usually what we are doing in other DRS projects is to have the solutions as the exploitable outcomes of a project. And okay, we have a very strong dissemination activity with the support of Water Europe that is also preparing this workshop too. Regarding the impact, from one hand, we have the impact to support the water authorities and water sector, both for the security and the sensor level, the security and the safety level. From the other hand, we have this very intense work on the research point of view with data acquisition from UAVs and Earth observation, social media monitoring, and so on. And then, of course, we try to establish these necessary pillars of impact regarding the safety of people, the emergency working routines, the standardization, and the society. So some of the key results that we have up to date for the first prototype, we incorporated to aqua3S platform the visualization of sensor measurements on a 3D map, visualization of sensor alerts on a map and graphs, setting some thresholds and sensors from the user side, and also incorporation of sensor with near real-time data received from legacy SCADA systems. This is very, very important. You all know from other projects that the project is finished after 3 years and there is no connection to the legacy system and integration and so on. Here, with the support from all the partners of the project, which are working very hard day to day in this project, from technical, from end user aspect, we managed even from the first prototype to have this integration and incorporation of sensor near real-time data from the legacy systems, the existing solution of the authorities to our platform. And we had an excellent pilot with data from Italy and from Asegas and from Bulgaria, from Sofiska Voda, and we had an excellent pilot during the first prototype. Now, under development, we have the visualization of tweets on the 2D map, visualization of Earth observation data, development integration of the sensors that we are developing in this project, the detection of anomalies in networks and sensor measurements in general, and also real-time assessments for the crisis severity level, considering data from several sources. I'm very happy to say that we had proceeded very well, and the second prototype will be on time, and the second pilot will be much more interesting. Now we are trying to see if we will do the second prototype pilots before summer, after summer, and we try to see all these COVID travel restrictions to be sure. Now you are going to hear more later, but the aqua3S is more related to the definition of water security directive, and also we are related to the drinking water directive you can see over there, and also to the security of drinking water infrastructure. And we also have we are related with some aspects of environmental preservation, again with the Water Framework Directive, but also with the flood directive, because floods affects a lot the drinking water. And here also you can see some very based on indicative results that we have in the project on how aqua3S can contribute in different level of policies. Actually, together with the standardization point of view, one of our goals in the project is to contribute to, in a policy level with white papers, suggestions, relevant workshops, and so on. Actually, we are in the middle of the project, and this is, we can see now all the potential that we can have the second part of the project, even more if there's going to be a short extension. Regarding the exploitation, again, we are working on it in collaboration with all the partners. One critical aspect is this standardization outcome that Philip mentioned, which we have to consider. So, and we are trying to see all the different type of ownerships that we are going to have, because technologies are co-designed with end users and so on. This is our consortium, and I'm very happy and excited to say, and very glad to say that the consortium is very committed and very hard workers, and the results are not coming by themselves. So the results are based on a very hard work. And also I would like to mention that there is, in every week, there is 2 telcos every week, one with end users, one with technical partners. That's why everything is proceeding rather well in the project. So this was my introduction, I would say, in aqua3S, to see which are the aspects that we are focusing on, which is the work that we have done so far. And
that's on time, so that was good.
I try to be exactly on time.
Yeah. So thanks for that. So let's now invite Antoine from Sen,
yes.
from Sen and AFNOR.
Yeah. I take the screen. Okay. Do you see my screen? It's okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, everyone. I hope you are well, and you hear me well too. So I'm Antoine. I work for AFNOR as a project manager in standardization, and I manage the Sen Technical Committee TC 164 water supply as a secretary. In this presentation, we'll try to explain the standardization process, how we work with the Sen TC 164, how we create or revise the standards, and how we can help each other in this very important topic of security. So before to start, I think it's important to show you or remind you what we do, and of course what we don't do. So you see on the first slide, you have a definition of the standardization. It's very classical, and you have what we do. So we develop voluntary standards, and voluntary is really a key word for our activity. We promote innovation, of course, and we guarantee the respect of the process, bring together national, European, and international experts. What we not do, it's important because people can find very often law, standardization, European directive, national rules, etc. Unless we have a request from the European Commission, we don't write a legal text. Therefore, a standard is almost always voluntary. And last point, we do not test products or material, and we don't do certification. So it's very important to keep in your mind, we make voluntary standard and no law directives or legislative document. So now what is our organization? First, we have for each country NASB, National Standardization Body. In this national group, you have the national experts who are interested in water supply. And it's very important because when a country has to vote on a subject, it's in this national group that the national position is defined. At the European level, you have the technical committee. This one is managed by me as a secretary, and with the help of a convener, Mr. Philippe Pied, in this case. We have one plenary meeting per year in June, and the TC is composed of experts who represent their country. The TC takes the decision like the registration of a work item, the activation of a work item, and votes on a different subject. Last level, the working group. Of course, we have many working groups in our TC on different subjects. You see the list here. And each working group has a secretary, a convener, and national experts nominated by their country. It's within the working group that the standard is written. So it's here that you can participate and help us. Of course, we have many talks between the NASB, the TC, and the working group, but the technical work is here. Now you have our organization, but how we write a standard. What is the process? You have a few steps to follow, and we will see. Step one, the preliminary work item. It's not an obligation, but when you need time to revise a standard or create a standard, and you want to start start the work with your European colleagues, it's a good idea to ask for a preliminary work item. Your NASB or your working group can ask to the TC to register the preliminary work item. We have a vote, a committee international ballot, or a TC decision during our plenary meeting in June. If the TC agrees, the preliminary work item is registered, and you have 3 years maximum before to request its activation. During this time, the work item is waiting. Step 2, the work item. You can skip the first step if the work is already advanced or not substantial. For example, if it's a minor revision of the standard. In this case, you can ask to the TC to take a decision to activate the preliminary work item or register the work item in the work program of the working group. If the result of the CAB is positive, the clock starts and you have 34 weeks to send your draft to the next step, the send inquiry. So in fact, since the last year, you can manage the time you want to allocate to this step, but it will be too long to explain. So keep in your mind that you have 68 weeks to work on your project, to publish your project in the whole process. And for the first step, for the work item, I took half, so 34 weeks. Step 3, the SEN inquiry. It's the most important step in the process, because the draft is proposed to the national expert in their NASB. The expert can comment the draft and propose editorial, general, and technical modification to the working group. The NASB must also vote, and if the result is positive, we continue with step 4, and the step 4 is the handling of comments. The working group must respond to all comments made during the SEN inquiry. So you have sometimes many comments. It's not easy every day, but the working group does not have to accept all the comments. It can refuse a comment, but in this case, it must justify why. It's very important, and when the project is finalized, it is sent to the formal vote, which is the last step before the publication. We ask for the last time if the member state agree with the project and the modification made after the SEN inquiry. At this stage, you can't make a technical modification, a technical comment. It's only editorial on a general modification. And of course, if the vote is positive, the standard is published. After the publication, a standard can be revised at any moment if we have a request from a working group or a NASB. And if the TC gives its agreement. 5 years after its publication, a standard is automatically reviewed to determine if we need to revise or withdraw the standard. And of course, the standard can also be confirmed if we don't need to make a change in the standard. So that's all for the process. It's explained very quickly, but you have the basis. And now I want to talk about our TC and how we can to develop a partnership and try to answer to the needs of the market on security. In our TC, we don't have many standards for security and safety. You see the numbers on the screen. I tried to make a research in all standards we have and all projects we have, and you see we only have 40 standards with the word safety of security in the title. So the process is not perfect, but it can give you an idea of what we do. And it's normal because TC164 is more performance oriented than development oriented. Of course, we have some very important standards like EN 15/1975, part 1 and 2, about security of drinking water supply. We have another project about guidelines for water safety plan concept in buildings. But if the security is a very important matter, the question is how to develop a partnership with you, the expert of security, and us, the TC water supply. We have a couple of solutions. First, each member can ask to his NASB, and by expansion can integrate a working group by his NASB. And when you are in the working group, you can promote a topic and ask to present it to the TC for registration in the work program. It's very simple. It's a classical way. You also can become, with aqua3S, for example, liaison or partner organization of the CNTC 164. With this statute, you can join our meeting and nominate an expert in all working groups. It's not necessarily the same in each working group, of course. And in this way, with your expertise, you can help us to develop security standards that will benefit you. But in any case, if you have to keep something of this presentation, it's that the work is always in the working group. So we need you, if you want to help us, it's in the working group. It's in the working group. I finish with one example of what we need. In 2011, we wrote EN 15975, but it was a request from the European Commission after the different terrorist attacks in the world. Today, we see a new type of terrorist attack. It's not physical, but technological with cyber attacks. And trust me, we are very aware of this type of attack, especially at AFNOR since 1 month. And I take an example. Maybe you saw in Florida in January, this attempt computer attack to poison the water of a city. It's very important to develop a partnership between us because we are nothing on that. And we have a need. We have a tool with the CNTC 164. You are the experts, so I think we can find something and work together. Mr. Cousin will come to our next plenary meeting to present aqua3S, and I hope we can work together in the future. Thank you very much for your attention, and I give the floor to Philippe or Mr. Anastasios.
Thank you very much. Also on time, it's great. So we look forward to also use this liaison mechanism to liaise with the TC 164. We see also other committee that could be useful, like 318 and 230. So thanks, Antoine, and give the floor now to Stuart to also give us some information about other committees that could also have some interest to liaise with aqua3S.
Okay, thank you, Philippe. I'll just share my screen if I can. Okay, thank you very much. I'm presenting today in my capacity as the convener of 2 working groups. These are working group 4, which is part of CNTC 230, water quality, and working group 16, which is under CNTC 318, hydrometry. I'd like to carry on from Antoine's excellent presentation on how to build a standard and show some of the things that we've done already in working group 4 on producing a standard for continuous measuring devices. Just a quick bit about the scope of the 2 technical committees. TC 230 water quality is concerned with everything to do with the quality of water, natural water, and wastewater discharges, that kind of thing. Everything from microbiological pollutants up to the chemical analysis of water using classical methods. It does not have any remit for quantity of water. That's the remit of CNTC 318 hydrometry, which in its scope has the determination of flow rates and quantities of water in the natural environment through to the built environment. Hence, my work gets split between these two technical committees, and the two working groups for which I'm convener have a common title in so much as they are concerned with setting performance requirements and test procedures for water monitoring equipment. Under Working Group 4, we've already produced standards for automatic samplers and continuous measuring devices. And under Working Group 16, we're currently working on devices for the determination of flow, water flow meters in general parlance. Now, you need to know what the flow is in a discharge, as well as the concentration of the pollutant in a discharge to work out the load to the environment. But just before I say a bit more about continuous measuring devices, it's worth just being aware that there is quite a lot of work has been done on matters related to continuous monitoring systems. The SEN-SABE, that's the Strategic Advisory Board for the Environment in SEN, has reviewed standardization needs in continuous water quality monitoring in 2018 and came up with, it looked at the difficulties in getting continuous monitoring devices accepted within the water industry in general, and the requirements that are needed in terms of standardization for to bring about to support the development of monitoring systems. There's recently, I'm not sure whether it's published or not just yet, but it's certainly the work is completed on ISO 24541 guidelines for the implementation of continuous monitoring systems. This standard is aimed very much at the water utilities and attempts to provide guidance on how to establish a continuous monitoring system for the supply of the drinking water supply network. And very recently, we've just started in TC 230 Working Group 4 on a standard providing guidelines for the selection, installation, and implementation of continuous measuring devices. This has really only just got underway, but is intended to take forward the existing standard on continuous monitoring devices and say, well, having got these, how do you install them? How do you maintain them? How do you calibrate them? So now to focus in on continuous measuring devices, this is European standard EN 17075. In terms, this is a product standard. So it sets performance requirements and test procedures. And the scope of the standard is quite broad in terms of the types of measuring devices that it covers. It's everything from physical parameters like temperature, turbidity, conductivity, through to chemical parameters such as chromium, phosphorus, chlorine. It also covers fixed and portable devices. Fixed devices are ones that are bolted in position, perhaps on a wastewater outlet. Portable ones that a person would take out into the field to make a measurement. And it includes inline and online devices. Inline devices are monitoring devices which the sensor is within the flow of water. And an online device is one where a sample of the water is extracted and pumped through the measuring device. The applications are quite broad. Wastewater from the sewage treatment plants and industrial wastewater discharges. This product standards can be used for product certification, and this indeed is the case in the UK under the UK's monitoring certification scheme, which takes applications for measuring devices which are tested in accordance with 17075 and then can be certified as meeting the requirements of that standard. Briefly, the standard is intended to demonstrate that the measuring device is fit for purpose. It doesn't go as far as to provide evidence that it will work in a specific application, but that it should capable of operating in various circumstances. What underlies being fit for purpose is the reliability of the measurements that the monitoring device can make. And these basically fall into three parts. One, the inherent factors, the inherent characteristics of the measuring device. And this will be in terms of things like bias, limit of quantification, linearity, etc. And then there are operational influences which might affect those inherent factors. So these might be variations in supply voltage, sample temperature, sample flow rate, and sample pressure. Then the third area that might affect the reliability of the measurement are environmental influences, variations in ambient temperature, relative humidity, interference within the wastewater or the water that is being measured, and incident light. And the conformity test procedures, which are used to evaluate a measuring device against these performance characteristics, are carried out in a combination of laboratory tests where everything is under close control, and field tests, typically of 3-month duration, which is used to demonstrate that the performance evaluated in the laboratory is maintained in the field. So moving on to how does this fit into aqua3S? I think a fundamental point that has to be understood is that the standardization process is a bottom-up and not a top-down process. Basically, what does that mean? Well, it means that someone comes through a national standards body and says, I think it would be a good idea to have a standard for measuring device X, Y, Z. And here we have a standard in inverted commas, a document which we think describes how you would set a product standard for that device. That is then taken into the working group and goes through the procedure that Antoine described, or being voted upon, and then being elaborated, developed by the working group with various points where there's public consultation on it. What does that mean in terms of the aqua3S process? Well, we would want to know what the relevant measurands are. Are you interested in chemicals and substances or physical parameters? Are there continuous measuring devices available now capable of making measurements on those relevant measurands? And then what are the applications? Are we interested in monitoring raw water or potable water? And what do we mean by reliable results in this context? Is it sufficient to screen the concentration of a pollutant in a particular water at some point where it indicates that a utility has to take further action? Or do you need a more accurate measurement which will allow more detailed assessment of the impact of that pollutant? So, but these are the key aspects, starting aspects for developing a standard. But the starting point has to be some kind of draft document, not simply a wish list. The working group has to have something that's reasonably substantive to be able to debate, develop, and elaborate. And the bottom line is always that we need experts. We need experts who understand what the standard is about and what it's trying to achieve, and can make detailed, valuable comments and suggestions towards its development. And if aqua3S has these experts, then we'd be very welcome within Working Group 4 to assist any future development. So I think that's all I need to say at this point. Thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Stuart. I think it's great. So we look also forward to also liaise with TC 318 and 230 for different perspective, in particular more from this water quality and yes, so it's quite interesting. Do we have Eric? No. Okay, so I think we are a bit quite advanced, so it's good. Okay, so maybe Tom, so you can maybe present also. So we have also different background also with. We will have this. It's good also to get the industry view from the market, because as Stuart mentioned, it is bottom up. So this bottom up need also we have to have a mechanism by which the market stakeholders can express themselves. So we are quite happy that to have Tom representing the British Water. So also to get a point of view from some quite let's say consolidated view at the level of a country. So Tom, if you want to, the floor is yours. You are muted. I see your mic is muted. Okay.
There we go.
Yes. Okay, thanks.
A little confusion of sharing my screen at the same time as trying to unmute myself. Classic Zoom error to start the day. My apologies. Okay, so just to give you a bit of a background to who I am, I've got sort of many hats here today as part of British Water. I run British Water's real-time monitoring group, and we represent the industry and anyone who's working in the real-time group. But I also work with UK Water Partnership, looking at the future of water, a number of universities, and technologies like one listed here, Sentry, which is a real-time monitoring system from Canada. So hopefully I can give you a bit of a background. I've worked for the last 10 years across the USA, trying to introduce some real-time monitoring and involved with some of the security protocols and the US military over there. But really, my first thing is, what is smart water? So what are we trying to monitor? Where are we introducing standards? And with this water cycle and the change of where we're looking, we're starting to move in our standards to outside the boundaries of the utility. We used to think of utilities as a boundaried setup of just delivering drinking water, but really is this integration of the environment and the full water circle where sensors are going now, and taking responsibility for those sensors and ownership of those sensors is a difficult challenge. And the market is divided between the big boys at the top and those who are lower down the food chain, who are supplying this technology. And standardization is a fear for those guys at the bottom end of the food chain, because a lot of these small startup companies don't have a lot of money, don't have a lot of time to go through standardization processes, and it's a big gamble for them as startups. So we have these guys at the top of the food chain, and on the left here is the big Microsoft, Google, Silicon Valley giants, and essentially they run the communication system, and whether it be on an Autodesk platform or an Amazon web server, that is very standardized in itself, and there's not many startups playing in that area. Now, 20 years ago, that's where the startups were, and that's where the big expansion for industry was, but they're being swallowed more and more by these huge corporations, and we expect the same to happen with monitoring and real-time monitoring. So whereas Microsoft started off as a platform for your computer, they now produce equipment. The computer I'm talking to you on today is a bit of kit that is produced by Microsoft itself. And Google are also in that space as well. They've moved from a software company controlling the platforms and the interactions into actually the equipment manufacturers. So we have to be conscious of that's probably where this is going. Then on the right, we've got these multinational consultants. And these guys are the ones that have the close relationships with the utilities and that are leading the way, but they're using established platforms that look very fancy, and it's a long way from that to a very small sensor or an IoT thing. And they present this idea of a digital twin, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, and some of that has been mentioned today with IoT feeds, sensors, drones, LiDAR. Point clouds are all part of that interaction and that visualization of our whole system. And the idea is with the digital twin is if we can have an exact replica in the digital world, we can trial different setups and look at different scenarios and operate within there and base our reactions on that. But for the small companies who are trying to build this network, we're very much in a build it will come setup, and the big corporations are expecting the small companies to be ready for this, and then not giving necessarily the instruction about what they want, and they certainly want it to be commodified and cheap and easy, and that's the communication we have with the utilities. And where we are with the utilities at the minute is we've got some fairly adopted and well understood assets, and there's standards around those. Stuart mentioned some around MCerts, around flow sensors, and loggers are starting to become standardized products now, and there's a fair amount of adopted technologies, and then we have this near future stuff, the stuff that's coming down the line that's been adopted by a couple of utilities, but isn't yet in the mass market. And this includes some AI, and AI is certainly a buzzword at the moment for the sector. But I still think as a sector, we're quite a way off AI becoming a reality. And certainly if you talk to the operators on the ground in a utility, that's something that managers talk about. Not necessarily what's actually going on the ground. We've already mentioned satellite water quality that monitors from space and doesn't have any contact at all. And then the last one on this list is real-time regulatory reporting. And this is where we're seeing a big shift at the moment. So corporations like Hack recently bought a database company as part of their Danaher setup, that was integrating the regulatory reporting that normally goes via the lab setup into real-time monitoring and building a database connection between the two. And this is, I think, where the market sort of currently is, and where the discussion needs to be had around the regulation side of things. So there's a couple of companies that I mentioned here. Aqua3S is a nitrite monitoring device. We've got Aqua Metrology Systems that do real-time heavy metals, whether it be selenium or hexchrome, or disinfection byproducts real-time, THMs, etc. But the troubles that the market has had with this is that these are small startup organizations, and these are regulatory compliance issues. And the regulatory market only recognizes the laboratory readings, not necessarily the online instruments. So in the US, I managed to introduce real-time THM monitoring to around 40 different states. However, it's still not a requirement. And there's a challenge between the utilities of, well, is this required that I do real-time monitoring of disinfection byproducts? Or is this something that I don't have to do? And if I don't have to do, maybe I don't want your monitor on there. Or is this something that's helping me run my operations? In which case I would be very interested in doing that, as long as I don't have to tell the regulator what my readings are. And then also the difference between a quarterly lab sample and a 20 times a day reading. Which of these readings is the one that's going to count towards the regulation? What is the average count? So in Spain, we managed to get the THM monitoring registered with ISO approval, and in 1 or 2 circumstances, it's been approved for regulatory reporting, and there's been a shift away from the lab. But this balance between the lab and real-time monitoring is the big sticking point in the market at the moment, as the regulatory shift doesn't want to recognize one particular vendor, understandably, but they can prove that instrument falls within standard and actually reports much more reliably than the lab, but then it's not required. And these companies are quite small, so it's a challenge to them, and they're not swallowed by the larger corporations, because the larger corporations are only interested when there's more than around 300 utilities adopting this technology. But this is where the growth market is. And what we need to be conscious of and discuss, and there is ways around this to make it easy, is that we don't choke the growth market and the startups who are doing interesting things. And we've seen certainly across the EU and in the States that the larger corporations use these SMEs as their R&D, and they let them succeed or fail, and then they swallow them up with a large check rather than a long-term investment. As we get to the other end of the market, which is slightly different from a lab in a box, we've got things like soil water sensors here, or this water sensor that's LoRaWAN. This is regional environmental monitoring that falls into the catchment zone, protection of our drinking water sources, which is in that catchment. And again, this equipment has been driven down in price, and these organizations are very small. This is commodity level stuff. So for example, the water sensor, the black one in the middle, these are around 1,000, 1,500 euros. They're not very expensive bits of kit. So you need to sell a lot of them to make any returns. And of course, an ROI has to include the time spent to get these things recognized, the time spent to get these things standardized, and going to meetings is a big part of that. And of course, standards don't want to recognize one particular vendor. So it's a chicken and egg thing, is how many vendors get together with these commodified products, and then who's responsible for this. And integrating this into the utility sector has been a challenge, because these organizations are using essentially commercial kit that's provided by, say, Android or Apple, or these kind of communication protocols. But they're not really involved in the higher sort of national security, cyber security of these bits of equipment. So when it comes to introducing it to a utility, they meet the head of the utility's cyber security network, and it just hits a blocker, because again, it takes people, it takes time. So this is where standardization and connection protocols really could show an advantage, is that if the vendors could say, okay, we just need to meet this standard on connectivity, and then the utility can handle the difficult, larger cyberspace security setup, which for very small organizations is a big challenge. And small organizations really shouldn't be responsible for a wider utility security protocol. And with that, there's a modernization of where the Environment Agency is going and the environment assets. We've seen a little bit of this in the US. The EPA in the US has always had completely open data. So every utility publishes their water quality data. It gets sent to your house every year. You have this information as a consumer, so it's very consumer fronted. Whereas many of you will know, if you try and find out actually your local water quality or anything in depth about the quality of what's going on within your utility or your river, it's very difficult. It's a big digging exercise, and it's very difficult to find that stuff out. So we need the environment agencies and the environment side of things, and this cross boundary between the utility and the environment monitoring to gel together, and to move into this open network. So we're essentially all have access to that if we're going to move towards this future digital twin vision that is being suggested. Just on some of the sort of near successes. So in the UK, we have a Rivers Fit to Swim GIS map that has data fed into that, and the open data from the environment has helped with that. And here we have some of the biomonitors. On the right, we have a Sentry monitor that's a microbial activity monitor, which is really new for the market. It's a dramatic shift. And then across the bottom there, we have the Lumin Ultra and the Oxford Nanopore that we've seen rolled out very successfully in the last year. And these guys were, again, small organizations that were doing PCR testing in rapid detection kits, and have been applied for COVID SARS monitoring across wastewater networks across the world. And for many years, I was involved with these types of organizations that were doing health detection equipment, but the utilities didn't want to know. They weren't interested. The remit was, well, why would we want to know that? Why would we care? But now, of course, post-pandemic, we're seeing really the value of understanding what goes on with our communities and how it affects our economy, our whole national infrastructure and national security. If we can track what's going on anonymously with our society, without targeting individuals, we can foresee what's coming down the line and get ahead of the game. So these kind of technologies being introduced is very, very beneficial. And then the one on the left here is just using a fairly old technology now, QR codes, to engage with the public and have them scanned on their phones and share data with them. So we're seeing app development now for information that can be shared around river quality. So you can scan the QR code and get the latest updates on what's going on environmentally or with the drinking water accordingly. Because let's face it, the two are very connected. So recently I had the guys from the States that I've been working with talk at one of my events, and we very welcome people to be involved in the British Water real-time monitoring groups. And this is guys from Water Suite, and they work in the DC area, looking after Washington DC and the Potomac River there. And their platform is essentially a agnostic database platform. And here what they do is they take sensor data from all different kinds of industries, again, cross-boundary, whether they be environmentally owned by the EPA for regulation on anything coming out into the river, or owned by say an oil company or a chemical company or a food company that's releasing wastewater onto that river, or has tanks or any equipment near that river for source water protection, but then also the utility data from DC Water. And this comes into a centralized mapping hub where we can see any incidents that go on, and we can assess and prioritize risk accordingly for anything that goes on. And with that, they have a contaminant database with 2,000 different chemicals on there that the emergency services and any frontline people can access, and they can access that on their phone. So if they're on site, they can see what's going on. It has information about, does it look like this, for example? Here's some photos of what an oil slick looks like. Here's some photos on what a PVC contamination looks like. Does it smell like this? Is this in the local area? Does it have these kind of biological things? Are you seeing dead fish? And it gives you a whole set of information so that you can score it accordingly and maybe narrow down what it is and what the emergency response should be to that spill, and whether that's just something as simple as closing drinking water works inlets, or whether that's something a bit more serious around army response and closing down areas and evacuating areas if it's a particularly nasty spill accordingly. And then the last thing I was going to say in my brief setup was the Oldsmar Florida SCADA hack made international news, and the news likes a fear story. But I think the thing that it highlighted to me, rather than the fear of the future technology, was that old systems are vulnerable. And that utility was operating an old Windows edition, and many utilities across the whole of the world still operate using Windows 97 technologies, and that was via a SCADA network. So this wasn't the current situation with standard tech as we have on our telephones. It was the old system that was the vulnerability. And secondly, the fear perpetuated around it was that by adjusting a dosing regime, that could somehow poison the general public. And certainly I've worked on water treatment plants all across the world, and most dosing pumps, well, certainly everyone I've seen, and I recommend that dosing pumps should not have the capability of dosing enough chemical to become a serious threat. Dosing pumps work within a window of this is around the lowest we dose accordingly, and this is around the highest. And any computer control or any digital control or sensor control is going to operate it within that window. And there shouldn't be any serious consequences of coming outside that window accordingly. The reality is that there needs to be physical override, not computer control, to dose in volumes that would be of any threat to the general public, because there needs to be a approved authorization. And as much as digital twins and cyber becomes part of our future, these are tools to help people, and people are still part of our operations. And they're, as much as we say that AI will be take over our jobs, the reality is that people make the best decisions because we're smart. And having people out there looking at our waters every day, and whether that's tracking photos on social media and people being able to see things that are going on in the river, or the operators on site who can physically see what's going on with their operations. People are our strength, and that's what we need to remember in this, rather than any kind of fear that a digital tool will take over. And even though, of course, there will be people who will try to disrupt that digital tool, the computer is not in charge. We're still in charge. Okay, thank you. I think that's all I need to say. If there's any questions accordingly or anything anyone wants to comment on.
Maybe we will have, thanks Tom, it's excellent. So we see this water security and all the threats very important. Also, obviously the human being is very important in the loop. So to also for improving the security. Maybe we will allow some question and answer at the end. So let's move on to the next speakers. Also, I know that Eric is also that make also the link to security with this NCIP on these critical infrastructures. So we have Eric Chauvehead with us. So you are muted, Eric. Okay. Good.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I will have to share my screen.
Yes.
But you have to unshare first the previous one. No? Okay, thanks.
Good.
You see it? Yes, it's
Yes.
okay. Okay, thanks.
Not full screen. We see you should click on the full screen.
Where is the full screen?
Because now we see the two slides, the one and the next.
Why that?
Maybe screen, white screen, no? When you see. Oh.
Eric, if you go here in the top where it says display settings,
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Okay.
there you should. Swap.
Which one?
Yes,
Swap.
swap.
Yeah.
See it? Okay, thanks.
Perfect.
So good morning to all of you. So today I will present some views about water security. So I will speak about some topics: water safety, water security. Of course, we'll see it's related to risk and crisis management. And I will also later speak about UNCIP, a group which was busy with drinking water. And I belong to this group. I joined this group a few years ago, but it started already before I joined them. So these guys, my colleagues over there, they developed a water security plan, and I will try to speak about that and present it. Just to present myself. So this is when I was younger, of course. I'm a PhD in organic chemistry, and I have been working for drinking water quality for more than 20 years now at the water company Vivaqua here in Brussels, Belgium. So I'm specialized mainly in water quality, everything which belongs to water quality, analysis, treatment, monitoring, pollution, in production, but also in distribution. I'm also Belgian representative at Euro, which is a organization for professionals in the water sector in Europe. I also member Belgian representative, let's say, for ISO TC 147, and also two same groups, the two TCs which are mentioned there. Level of security, we took part as end user in several projects, European projects, Water Safe, ISIS, and now aqua3S. And so, as I mentioned already, I am not so long ago, 2-3 years ago, member now of UNCIP TG water quality. So when we speak about water safety and security, I will try to present you some definitions. For safety, I took the definition from the WHO. So in fact, safe drinking water does not represent any significant risk to health over a lifetime of consumption. So in fact, the basic idea is drinking water should be safe, not only for drinking, but also for food preparation, personal hygiene, and washing. Of course, shorter exposure is also safety, because this sentence mentioned lifetime, but if you are exposed short times, it's also safety. We see that this safety concept, let's say, it's already included in several documents. and they refer to this drinking water safety. So we have the drinking water directives. Till 98, it was already really clear, but it was reinforced, I would say, more recently in 2015 and now 2020, the last version of the drinking water directive. But of course, the safety is also mentioned or highlighted in the water safety plan developed by the WHO, also called the WSP. And it's also in the EN norm from 2013, which I say it's a good document. I prefer it to the WHO water safety plan. It's more clearer, the EN norm. It's quite easy to understand, easy to follow, well structured, and so it's quite easy to apply. Water security, it's not always easy to find a definition about that. So there is one definition coming from the UN. So it's the capacity of a population to safeguard sustainable access to adequate quantities and acceptable quality water for sustaining livelihoods, human well-beings. So I will stop here. You can read the rest of the sentence, but it's a known sentence. So again, there we see quality human well-being. So it refers to health and quality of the water, if we look at that aspect. We have also documents related to more to drinking water security. So there was this critical infrastructure directive from 2008, but the focus was mainly on asset protection, and drinking water was not included as critical infrastructure. But by the way, several member states, Belgium included, defined drinking water as a critical asset, as a critical infrastructure. Now there is, let's say, on the table a new proposal, a new directive, not yet published officially. It's a proposal, so it's from December last year. It's about resilience of critical entities. So it's maybe can be seen as a new way, because it's not only protecting assets, but it's also enhancing resilience. So be sure that in case of problems, you will be able to smooth as much as possible the problem and be resilient. So recover as quickly as possible too. So there, normally drinking water should be defined as a critical infrastructure, at least we hope, and it's on the good way. So finally, to be short, safety and security, they are always somehow related, at least for drinking water. They're always related to water quality and health. So it's not always easy to make the difference between both. And there is some confusion, in fact. If we look at two examples I took, if you look at the EN norm, it's clearly related to water safety plan developed by the WHO. But in fact, the title is security of drinking water. If we look at the new directive, the proposal, the resilience of critical entities, it's clearly related to EU security. But when you look at Article 6.1, it mentions public safety. So this confusion is regular, and even for us, it's not always easy to know if it is safety or security. So what is really the difference between both? Finally, maybe it doesn't really matter. It's again, at least for drinking water quality, you have to get good quality to ensure good health of the people, finally. Now, in fact, safety and security, it's more about risk and crisis management. So I took a nice graph showing the most important steps of a crisis management with pre-crisis or pre-disaster. In this case, it's more disaster than crisis, but it's the same principle. So we have the pre-disaster or pre-crisis phase. So it's more the phase where we'll look at risks, assess them, and try to prevent them. Then you have, well, you don't hope that, but you could have an event, which is shown by the star. And then you start at one time crisis management. So you have to respond to this crisis. You have several steps you can undergo. And after the crisis, normally you will have the post-crisis, or in this case, post-disaster. In fact, we have already documents which are quite interesting, so I mentioned them already. The WSP from the WHO, the EN norm, European norm, and also the Critical Infrastructure Directive. So they are more related to risk assessment, so before the crisis. And so this EN norm, again, it's very good because it's included in at least 2 directives, drinking water directives, the most recent ones, 2015 and 2020. And it's, again, a very good document to start and to make risk assessment and risk management. Now for the response or the crisis itself, there are other documents. Again, the European norm, there is another version of the European norm. And we have also some ISO norms, which can be a good basis to organize and establish a crisis management plan. Now, if we go to UNCIP and about water security plan, in fact, it could be seen as something new from what I presented before. So UNCIP, there are several thematic groups. And I belong to one thematic group, which is the one highlighted in green, which is a chemical and biological risk to drinking water. So there, my colleagues over there developed what they call a water security plan. So you see there are several thematic groups, but I will focus mainly on this one, of course, related to drinking water. If we look at the threats shortly listed for water management, we can categorize them into unintentional or intentional threats. Unintentional, for example, we can have contamination, process failure, natural disaster, or climate problems, or problems related to climate. Intentional, again, you can have contamination, but you can also have physical damage, cyber damage, and also something which is quite new, maybe it's everything which has to do with fake information and news, which is another threat. So I gave a color to these only to make a small difference between, can we prevent these to occur, in fact? Those in blue could be prevented. It's not always easy to prevent them, but normally we should be able to prevent them. Those in red, it's much more difficult to prevent. And in that case, you should be ready for crisis management if they occur, because prevention won't be so efficient. And so, for example, intentional contamination, fake news, natural disaster are very difficult to prevent. Normally, physical damage, cyber damage, you could or you should be able to prevent them. We heard before that it's not always the case. We had examples recently about cyber attacks. But normally, if you have a well-organized IT system, you should be able to prevent these. Process failure, contamination, which are not intentional, could be prevented. But we know, of course, they aren't completely prevented. And so the water security plan in this picture is really concentrating itself to intentional contamination. Now, if we look at, again, risk assessment, and we compare safety and security, we have the water safety plan, which is translated, as I mentioned, in the drinking water directives, at least the 2 last versions. So it's mainly focused on those kind of risks, the risk where you have quite a high impact, but also quite likelihood. So I took this matrix with several levels of risks. It's only an example, but just to show that the water safety plan mostly will not cover very low likelihood events and very low impact events too. You can, but most of the time you will focus on the most likelihood events with the high likelihood and those with the highest impact. Now the water security plan is really dealing with one particular case. So it's intentional contamination, sorry. So it's something which could be potentially very high in impact, but the likelihood could be very low. So this plan is focusing on this kind of events. So the scope of the water security plan is really, as I mentioned, intentional contamination of drinking water, at least what was studied within this thematic group of UNCIP. It's belonging to an event with low likelihood, potentially high impact, and it's concentrating on chemical and microbiological contaminants. So we are not dealing in this group with cyber threats, physical threats, even not with radiochemicals. So that was the scope of this water security plan. Now, this is more in detail, or at least a summary, what the water security plan contains. So it's divided into 4 steps, I would say, big steps. So planning, event detection, event management, event recovery. So planning, it's really developing management plan, assess the risk. Again, it's intentional contamination. It's very difficult to assess the risk. You know the threats, but do you know exactly the probability of such events? It's not easy. And maybe something new, it's vulnerability. You know that it will target you weak points, which is not always the case for unintentional. Unintentional is not really focusing on your weak points, but when it becomes intentional, it will really focus on your weak points. So vulnerability is maybe something new, which can be different from other events. And of course, in principle, you should implement some security measures if you can. Now, could be that you will get a contamination, intentional contamination of your drinking water. And so you must be able to identify any abnormal event or events. There might be several events at the same time or close to each other and related. You have to characterize any contamination, which is also a big challenge. And then you have to perform an assessment of the situation, of course. So there you see, as I will show later, it's clearly related to crisis management somehow. Afterwards, the next steps, it's more crisis management. So let's say, we could say the first step planning, it's more risk management. It's before the event happens. The other steps are more related to crisis management. So, and you will find some similarities. The first step, you find similarities with water safety plan or the European norm. And for crisis management, you will find similarities with the European norm and ISO norms about that. So I won't speak too much about event management, event recovery, because in the principle, it's more or less the same as what is already today in other documents. But the big problem is to define when do you enter crisis in case of intentional contamination of your drinking water. And that's really, according to me, the biggest challenge, this border between risk management and crisis management. If I take again my picture about all the steps from pre-crisis or pre-disaster to crisis, disaster, and post-disaster, post-crisis. When you see some accidents or fire, or you see some explosion, you know immediately when the crisis starts. It's very visual. You have facts which are quite easy to catch or to observe. Now, when you go to drinking water, especially networks, everything is on the ground. The water is in the pipe. You don't see a lot. You see, in fact, nothing. You're blind. So, in fact, something can happen in the network, and you should be able to detect it quickly. And that's really a challenge. And not only detect, but also detect, it means location, but also what is it? What is its impact? A fire, an explosion, you know its impact. You will see it immediately. But contamination of drinking water, it's much more difficult to evaluate any impact on the population, for example. So finally, for the water security plan, I think when we compare to what exists today, risk management and crisis management, so really assessing vulnerability of your system, it's something which it's quite new compared to water safety plan. So it will always be very difficult to prevent it, intentional contamination, but at least you should examine all your vulnerability points or places or systems to try to minimize any or to prevent any contamination. But by the way, in practice, it will be very difficult to avoid if people really want to intentionally contaminate your water. On the topic of event detection, that's, as I mentioned, very important to be. You should be as early as possible, like any crisis or any problem, and there you need really event detection systems, which will combine several systems. You cannot rely on one. Of course, we have very known systems like complaints, health surveillance. In this case, maybe state security surveillance, which is also different from water safety plans, where you don't really need the state security surveillance. But you will also have to combine, most probably, online monitoring, as was presented before, and also rapid analytical tools. So these are, I think, for the moment, the main differences with the water safety plan, what has been developed within the water security plan. Now, the UNCIP thematic group has developed several documents, so guidance for the production of water security plans, guidelines for continuous online monitoring, and also some review about rapid detection of chemicals and biological contaminants. So these are recent documents from 2019, 2020, which are quite interesting to read, and some of them bring some new concepts about all these topics. So the water security plan, in fact, it's, as you saw, as I tried to highlight, it's composed of both risk and crisis management. Risk management, so it can be an extension of the water safety plan. So the water security, water safety, there is no clear border, as I mentioned at the beginning. Even between security and safety, there is not always a clear border. So here also, with both plans, they can be combined, or one can be the extension of the other. And maybe the biggest difference with the water safety plan, it's the water security plan is more based on a vulnerability analysis, which could help you to prevent events. Crisis activation, it's maybe also a little bit different than with a water safety plan or a crisis management plan. So it will be based on many early detection, combining, for example, as I mentioned, online monitoring, rapid analytic methods, because you have to quickly assess the contaminants. What is it? What is the danger? What could be the impact? So you have to really, you need quick analytical tools. And of course, you will combine that with other data like complaints, health surveillance, or state security surveillance, even other means which are or will be developed within the aqua3S project. So finally, these concepts or some of these concepts from the water security plan can be introduced in the European norm, I think, in both. But of course, it will complement this, it could complement these European norms, I think. Some last thoughts about the water security plan. According to me, it cannot be a standalone plan. You could only foresee water security plan, but in fact, I don't think a lot of people will do that. Why? Because today, really the probability of intentional contamination is close to zero. I don't say it's zero, but I don't know any event today, or at least they are not public, but there are not a lot of events, really people trying to contaminate intentionally drinking water. While on the other hand, cyber threats are much more common today because they are much more easy to perform. It's at distance, you are not exposed as a hacker, so you are somehow hidden. So it's much more easier today, and it can lead to a lot of problems and show you failures. Online monitoring, so as presented in the water security plan, it can be also useful for water safety plan, in fact. In fact, online monitoring is already used for a long time within the drinking water industry, mainly for production of drinking water, transport, and storage. Distribution of drinking water, it's much less equipped with online monitoring today, but it's in development. So, and within the aqua3S project, but within other projects, it has been developed, and even people go further nowadays, and they really deploy on site. They try to deploy on site online monitoring for distribution networks. Finally, rapid analytical tools or methods can also be useful for water safety plan, in fact. But they will be also very useful during crisis and recovery phases when you have a crisis. In fact, when you have a crisis which is related to water quality, you have to assess at the beginning, of course, the problem, but you have to follow it. And surely in the recovery phase, as stated in different documents, you have to analyze your system, let's say, or the evolution of your system. So it could be also very useful to have more and more rapid analytical tools, even which can be used on field, of course. And so this reminds me another ISO document, 22017, which deals with rapid radioactivity measurements in case of emergency. So in fact, there, in case of emergency with a radioactivity event, they developed a document specifying which kind of tools, rapid tools, you could use to get quite rapidly a diagnostic of the situation. So, and I thank you for your attention. Here I am.
Thanks, Eric. It's more than excellent because it's really completely focused on the water safety, water security, and also the liaison also you do with ANSIP. And I guess I like very much also your slides, and for that. So the event is recorded, so I guess we will also people will replay what you say. It's quite interesting, and we see a lot of connection with the standard. You mentioned this EN 15745, but also ISO things. So we have a lot of food now for for work. So for thoughts, it's good. So thanks for that. And let's see later on if we have questions. So now I will. So we are also on time, which is excellent. So let's have our last speaker before the Q&A. So it's Francesca. So we in aqua3S also we look at also because we see all the directive, the importance of the policy and also the importance to be in line. So with Francesca from some of Italian authority, we did some survey, and we thought quite useful to show you some kind of feedback we have learned from the survey. So this is the last speaker, and then we'll have some question-answer session where we hope also you can stay online to help us to answer some question in order to get also some kind of quality feedback. So please, Francesca, so we have Francesca Lombardo. The floor is yours.
So, good morning to everyone. Let me share my screen. Only a moment. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes. Good.
Okay. So, good morning to everyone. My name is Francesca Lombardo, and I am a civil engineer, civil hydraulic engineer from AWA. AWA is the water authority of the Oriental Alpes River District, and we are one of the water authority in Italy, and we are also a partner of the aqua3S Consortium. We are both user partners. We are co-responsible of the implementation of one of the pilot use case, the Italian one, but we are also in charge of another activities, which I'm going to summarize in this presentation. In particular, the goal of this activity, already introduced by Tasos, is to present in a form of a white paper some policy suggestion for the European decision makers related to the topic of water security. And so in these slides, we are going to summarize what's carried on until now. Firstly, a short clarification about the topic of water security. Of course, Eric's presentation already introduced it and clarified this topic in an excellent way. Then we have performed a short survey in the current and proposed European regulation. Then in parallel, we also perform a survey amongst the key stakeholders of the water sector in order to gather the feedback suggestions that can lead to this feedback in order to a future update of the European regulation. So before to start, let's clarify the concept of water security. Of course, Eric already clarified this, but let's only think for a moment at an intuitive level of which are the aspects of the water that can represent an hazard against the security. I think many different answers can be possible to these questions, very different one for each other. For example, for someone, an hazard against security can be, for example, the presence of pollution and contamination of the water, the possibility of waterborne diseases. For someone else, for example, water security can be related to flood or other extreme meteorological events, maybe triggered by the climate change. For someone else, water security can be a matter of water scarcity, drought. For someone else, instead, maybe someone who is lucky enough to live in a place where water is clean, or there are not any kind of quantitative issues. Maybe a problem could be the fact that the distribution network are not so efficient, there are leakages, there could be service failure, high operational cost. So many different aspects, many different topics. This is, as already presented, the official definition of water security from the United States in 2013. And as you can see, if you read this definition is general enough to encompass all the aspects introduced in the previous slide. But now, if we consider this definition as a whole and we search for in the European regulation for a unique directive that is focused on all this definition, the first result that we can see is that such a directive currently does not exist. However, let's reason in another way. Let's identify in the United Nations definition of water security different aspects. For example, we have focus on these four different aspects: the access to adequate quantities and acceptable quality of water for everyone, the protection against accidental or malicious treats, the aspect related to the water-related natural disaster like flood, drought, and the aspect of preserving the ecosystem and the environment. So if you consider all these aspects separately, there are indeed many European directives that are related to one or also more of these aspects. For example, in this case, the access to adequate quantities of water, we are all the line of the Drinking Water Directive, starting from the original directive of 98 for the latest amendment that has been approved at the end of the last year after a very interesting citizen started initiative, the Right to Water initiative. Then if we talk about protection against accidental or malicious treats, as Eric already introduced it, there are many different directives. For example, the directive about European critical infrastructure, and Eric also pointed out is not currently applicable to the water distribution network, but however it could be represent a possibility to extension or to integration also to the water distribution network. So I decided to insert here as well. Then we are the NIS directive, the directive of security of network and information system, and we have two proposals of directive that are the proposal of directive for the resilience of the critical entities and the update of the NIS directive. Then, of course, if you consider the aspect of flood, even floods and water-related disaster, even here we are a lot of different directives. The flood directive, also in this case, the European the directive of critical infrastructure, the groundwater directive, the waterfront directive, and of course we have also many different directives that represent the aspect of preserving the ecosystems and environmental protections. Then we can also make a similar approach if we focus on the different targets. In fact, inside the definition of the water security, we can also identify different targets that can be the water supply and distribution network, the water bodies, including rivers, groundwater, coastal areas, the human health and safety, and the environment, including both in wide sense, tools including both urban area and natural areas. And so we can also identify those directives classified by target. And then also, if we consider again the definition of water security, there are a lot of different actors involved. For example, we have water utility, water supply network manager. We have, of course, the security force, the policy, the army. We have the civil protection, the first responder, the healthcare operators, environmental agency and water authorities like AWA, and local and regional government authorities, and also reasoning by actors. We can also, for these actors, identify their roles and their target water security directive. So let's summarize a bit with an example what's presented in the previous slide. For sake of simplicity, let's focus only on three of water security directives: the Drinking Water Directive, Water Framework Directive, and Flood Directive. Each of these directives has a dedicated plan that can represent, let's say, a tool for implementation, and each of these directives is as its effect to one or more target and involve one or more actors. So you can see as a summary here, the situation reasoning in this way is quite complex in the sense that there are a lot of synergies, overlapping, crisscrossing of role, and maybe also potential contrasts and conflicts. And I only inserted here three directives. So let's think what can be happened if we list all the directive years. In this sense, one of the critical aspects in the water security regulation is this aspect of synergies, coordination, contrast, overlapping. But let's suspend for a moment this aspect, and let's focus on the second activities that I presented in the introduction. In parallel with these activities of analyze the current regulation, we also conduct a survey among the key stakeholders of the water sector. The surveys were conducted in the form of a Google Sheet with open answer and multiple choice questions. And the target were the actors in the water security, mostly technical background. We are, of course, firstly focused on the end user partner on the aqua3S Consortium, but not limit of them. And it was a very big questionnaires, big survey. It took a lot of effort from the end user to answer to these questionnaires. And the goal, of course, was to gather the needs and gaps for the expert of the sector related to the current European regulation about the water security. So, as you can see, it has some example of graph of a survey that represent the different kind of audience. For example, here we are with different type of organization involved, and are all water security actors as defined in the previous slide. We have different nationality involved, and also many different background. Mostly are technical background, but we are also some legal and juridical representative. The survey was divided in different sections. For example, we have some sections that were specific for the 4 different aspects of water security that I've already introduced it in the initial slide. And for example, for this specific aspect, we asked to the end user different specific questions, ranging, for example, about how much the work of the end user organization is pertinent to this aspect, then ranging to the presence of many different actors involved for ensure this specific aspect of water security. Then we ask some specific questions about the existence of synergies, collaboration between some different actors. And then we also make some questions about the presence of standards about this aspect. And this I received many curious answers, because for I asked to the expert of the sensor of the awareness of specific standard, and if I'm quite sure that all these experts of the sector work in every daily with a standard, in most cases, most of the users were not aware of the existence of standard. So this is something to take in mind. Even if indeed there are indeed standards in their everyday work. Then we also ask some very more general questions related to the water security as a whole. For example, the awareness of the United Nations definition, and also the importance as a whole of the to create different synergies, the importance for a whole to homogenize the different plans, procedures according to the various European regulation, and also the willingness of the user to support initiative like proposing new standards for improve water security in the future. Moreover, in the survey, there are also many different places to insert open answer questions to provide feedback and suggestions. For example, here are some spare suggestions collected by the end users during the questionnaires. For example, for some end user, it's important to enhance the shared experience between the different actors and sectors. actors. And also related to this topic, we have also many different users, things that is important to unify in a single plan, with many different ones who pursue the same objective. Of course, it's important for them also to clarify the roles and competences of the different actors involved. So these are also aspects related to the, let's say, coordination and synergy. The other important needs related to the water security is the focus on the prediction of disasters. Impose as priority for all the water utility, both the security of their service, both the use of higher quality standards. Then they need to impose new advanced analysis technique. And of course, also many different users says that there could be the need of specific guidance related to many different technical matters that, in their opinion, are not currently specified by the current procedures and regulation. So at the end of this work, just to sum up the result, what can we suggest to European policymakers for future water security regulation? First things that come into my mind is that water security appears as a concept too wide and complex to be regulated by one single directive. However, there is a need of a common legislative instrument that is explicitly targeted to the water security as a whole, and is to create or strengthen the synergies and the connection between the many various water security directives. In particular, a specific focus should be given in issues like the role of the different actors, the coordination of different plans, the synergies between the different type of measures indicated by the different regulation, and this should be done at every scale, so ranging from the local distribution network to the national and international level, and in particular during the emergency situation. The coordination at the community level should provide indication about how the different actors involved have to conciliate different and in some cases contrasting need, because of course it's clear that if we dealing with water security, we deal with concept like the environmental preservation or the need of end users, the human right to access of water. So there can be in this sense, of course, some contrasting aspects, and so there should be a clear orientation toward, for example, eventual win-win measures that are measures that can help to gain, achieve more than one goals in parallel. Then another interesting aspect, it could be the introduction of sectorial regulation or guidance specific for the water distribution network and for the water bodies to integrate some aspect of water security which are currently treated by generic water center directive. To provide an example, there are aspects like the cybersecurity, the resilience, the protection of critical infrastructure that are dealt by some directives that are generic for many different kind of infrastructure. So in that sense, some specification or guidance, more water center could be helpful. Finally, there is a need to provide to the technical staff of the water security sector a clear guidance about the international standard, new technology and procedures, and the relationship with regulation, as is I understand from the answer to the questionnaire, for many actors, water security actors, is not currently fully clear this aspect, which are the standards and which are the relationship with the regulation. So in that sense, spread the awareness is very important. Another interesting things can come from suggestions from the survey is that, and I totally agree on this, is on this comment, is that water is still treated mostly as a technical matter by the actors, but the proper emphasis should also be given to issues like the inclusion of marginalized categories, the transparency to the customer, raising the awareness of the water supply operators about the legal and ethical implication for the service they are providing. And finally, as presented in a couple of slides ago, there is the need to provide a clear technical guidance about specific topic identified by stakeholders in the survey, because in their opinion, they are not treated with enough detail by the current regulation. For example, assessing the impact of climate change in everyday works, increase the protocol of communication between different actors, in particular during the emergency, process and collect citizen-generated information, use of sensor technologies to detect anomalies, forecast of hazard events, understand of vulnerability, establish cross-border communication. So these are all topics when the users express the need to have clear guidance. And as a side comment, these are sort of topics when initiative and project like aqua3S could provide indeed a good answer to overlap the gaps. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions.
Thanks, Francesca. So it's excellent. So we see that we already have a lot of suggestions from the market. So it's good, and we keep let's say gathering all this market feedback. Maybe now to help on that, because okay, we can now go for an open Q&A. I think maybe it could be into step. First steps, I think we have prepared some question, and we could using the Slido, we can have a online answer, and then I hope the time permit, we will also have we can have a set of think, but otherwise you will have. We will send you a mail also with a set of slides, and you will get also the aqua3S contact. So you can you could be free to contact me or to contact Tazos even later on, because we like also to stay in contact with the interest attendees and for this market feedback information. So thanks, Francesca. Maybe Anka, we can start the Q&A.
I will start my share screen so everybody sees this. You can click either, so I'm refreshing, sorry, for 1 second. Okay, do you see my screen in full screen, my slide?
Yeah.
Perfect. You can either with your phone take a picture if you have, of course, a QR code application, or you can go to slido.com, just insert aqua3S there, and you will be able to go to the poll that we have prepared for you. So I will start now with the first question. 1 second, please. Okay. So we have now a first question. You can select one of the options, the domain you
Yes, so we need to because it's very important to know for this feedback who you are. So I think it's quite interesting to get the answer also with. So we see that we have different good. I don't say balance, but at least we have four categories of. Let's wait a bit, and then we go to the. So we will use this because also Eric was highlighting the importance of this EN 15745 water crisis management. So the crisis management preparation and the risk also in section 2. So I think this will. Obviously, it's not these are not the only one, only standards are interesting, but at least that deserves some attention. So we see important to focus on that. Okay.
When you want me to go to the next question, just let me know.
Maybe we can go now. Okay. Okay, so it's in the way that when you describe your production and the distribution and what are the different documents you use for describing. We can select many, right, on cars. I think we can go and give a rate, or it is.
Yes, it should be possible to select multiple answers. Or not. Sorry, 1 second, please. Yes, it should be multiple choice. So.
Okay, good.
No, it's not. Sorry. My page doesn't work, so I'm sorry. I don't know why my internet doesn't work during Zoom session sometimes. So we can go to the next question.
Yes. Okay. Okay, in that it is on the risk assessment, which is a chapter 4.5. How do you identify possible security and safety issue? So the idea is to rank a bit the different possibility. Is not one answer, but it can be multiple answer, and for each answer, you give the level of importance to the way. For instance, field visits are very important. You put maybe 5 out of 7. If we use maybe the like Earth 7, that means 3 disagree, strongly disagree, maybe okay, average or agree, strongly agree. So you say what are the different parts?
Yes, they can in fact rank them, so put them in the order of importance to them. Each can be set in an order of importance, how important it is. So the 3 options, how important they are to identifying possible security and safety issues. So I think everybody filled it in, no changes I've seen.
Yes.
You can go to the next, yes. It's the same, how important they are, and they can.
Yes, this is a question on the evaluation and writing the risk. Okay.
I see no further changes, yes. Here they have more to read. It's more to read.
Yeah. How do you determine appropriate risk and control measures, reassessment and classification? It's sorry for the maybe a complex question, but if you understand, it's quite important for us because still also some clarification coming from because the EN's document, it's a bit let's say global and generic. It's important to understand. Okay, so this question maybe not very popular. It's a bit time to.
No, there is a lot to read, yes.
Yeah,
If
yes.
you want to understand better, yes.
Okay, maybe so we are R14. We we have 10 questions, so it's only we are coming to the second half and okay, this is question 6 on the design and develop the action plan. We have six sub questions and to be ranked by order of also of importance. Okay. How you perform control measure risk.
No more, so I can go to the next.
Yes, so 2 more technical questions and then a final, just so be patient.
No, some responses are still coming, so let's, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I will go to the next now.
Okay, so maybe more complex. So the last technical question. Sorry for that. So it's on documentation, which is also include training of personnel and everything. So okay, so then the final question for us is kind of, I think, summary of what we what are the other questions. Do we believe that we need to complement the standard, or everything's fine? So this also to summarize. Okay, a few seconds more and then we conclude. Okay, then, so that concludes this quick polling, and thank you very much for the ones that have, let's say, participated to that. So until noon, we have some time for Q&A. So I guess, Anka, people can raise a hand, right? And then we give the floor.
No, I don't have any hands.
No, but if people want to ask questions,
Of
maybe.
course, we can give them the microphone, yes.
Yeah, yes. So if you want to ask questions to the panelists, to the speakers, please raise your hand and then we can give you the floor. Nobody want to raise a hand? So, okay. Ah, Peter. Peter Rublik. So, okay, Peter Rublik, give you the allow to talk. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Philippe. Are you able to hear me okay?
Ah, it's Peter Smithing. Okay, Peter watching. Okay,
Yes.
Two Peter, so I don't know why asking raise a hand. Okay, go ahead first.
No worries. Oh, sorry.
So Peter Rubling, maybe because
okay, me. Okay,
yes,
sorry for the.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for this really interesting event. It was a big topic of standardization. It's a lot to do also for the national side of the different countries, of the different. So we have also a lot of national standardization institutes who are dealing with a lot of other standards, and so I think it's a very complex and very it's a lot to do there in harmonizing this standards and yeah, it was an impressive event. Also the insights from the different other people. Thank you really much. This was
from which organization are you from?
I'm from SME Group from Austria. We are a small group of small companies dealing in the water treatment sector, and so we are especially also very interested in this EN 15975. It was impressive, this presentation. Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, please stay. You will get. We will send a mail to everybody. So with the copy of the presentation, copy of the findings from the poll. And we will also invite you to contact us, because we need also water utilities, big and small, and we need also SME. So we need all the market forces to express themselves, because they might have different opinion. And it's important, as Antoine from this SEN committee expressed, this is a bottom up, so people have to express themselves, and we have to have a balance about what the market needs. So we need to have everybody expressing themselves. So feel free to contact us, and maybe we can have even one-to-one talk later on.
Thank you. Yes, of course. That's of course also the national countries have their different opinions on this standardizations, and there are a lot of forces.
If you have a link with Austrian national group or whatever, also we are quite happy to liaise with any groups that are interested. So we have the British, the French, the Greek, exactly. But we like to get any opinion from any consolidated group. So it's good. Do you have a specific question?
Yeah, only with maybe to force with the exactly what I was trying to ask. It was such a huge topic. It's really difficult. We had here a lot of questions also in the Slido, but it was also a really basic question. So how we can do it on a European level, the standardization. It is really basic.
Yeah, yes, but anyway, if it is specific, we can have an offline discussion, and we can obviously we will try to help you if how to contribute to standardization. So we can we will likely also make a liaison between aqua3S, and aqua3S then is willing to represent the market forces. So this is one way. Another way, as also Antoine was mentioning, is to discuss, to liaise with your national group. I don't know in Austria the name of your national body, but you have national body where you can also express your things. But anyway, we'll try to, and we will likely also in the sometime end of the year or maybe next year to create also industry workshop. It's called a SEN workshop agreement, where we'll have everybody coming and expressing themselves in order to report the market forces feedback to the standardization. So we put in place a mechanism to ease the feedback of the opinion from the market forces. So we will give the chance to that. So we'll because now we have all your names, we will keep in contact with you and to make some information about that.
Yeah, there's a lot to do here.
Okay, good.
Yes, I confirm you have an ASB with AZ, Australian Standardization Institute.
Yeah, for sure, but I didn't know the name, so AZ, so you can talk to AZ. Okay, thanks, Peter. So maybe Peter, the other Peters, you want to say something?
Yes, of course. Thanks very much, Philippe. I just had a question, I guess, stemming from the end of Francesca's presentation, and I would just like to ask the other panelists on this. So as Francesca's presentation had said that water is treated largely as a technical matter by most actors, and that there should be a greater emphasis on issues of inclusion, on the human rights surrounding water as a whole. And I guess Tom, I believe Williams, had addressed this a bit in his presentation, particularly in relation to the smaller actors or working in the area. But I'm just wondering, generally within the standardization process, where the relevant stakeholders think that these kind of more qualitative assessments of vulnerability or a more human-centric understanding of vulnerability can be built into the standardization process. Just any thoughts or ideas would be welcome. And let me know if you'd like me to be more specific in relation to the question as well.
Okay. You want to get Tom feedback or?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Yeah, I think engagement with the public is an essential part of this process, and as I mentioned at the end of my presentation, that people are most important part of this. Some of the implications around what you're saying are around access and vulnerability around access to water, and I feel that certainly is something that's very important to address, but is also culturally relevant to each location across the whole of Europe, and needs to be dealt with on a very small local level, really. And I think only by having this openness of data and this bigger conversation can we deal with those things, is because each community then is engaged around their local water bodies and their water supply, and I think that public engagement will bring interesting conversations. I'm not sure how we can standardize and legislate that from the top, only encourage that and show examples of that from different areas, how we've engaged with our populations.
Good.
Okay, thanks very much, Tom.
Okay, so if there is no more hand raise, Well, thank you, everybody. Maybe Tazos, do you want to say some word to conclude?
I think that thanks everybody that participated, answered the poll, asking questions. I think it was very, very important for us as a project, but also for the community in general, to identify some major issues. From all talks, I understood that there are some not very clear borders between water safety, water security, standardization, harmonization, the market. It was very interesting for me to see the process in order to participate in a standard and so on. I think we cover the aspect. We covered the aspect from the issue from all the aspects. So we've made a lot of progress, and I think it was excellent. And we are ready to start designing the second one, which will be very, very more specific and more detailed. So I think thank you everybody for this one, and of course thank you Philippe for the organizing all this excellent workshop.
Okay, thanks for everybody. So as I say, that we will hear from us, because we will do a follow-up email where we will send you all the copy of the implementation somewhere. Also, we might also work on additional or maybe refine offline questionnaire, because it was quite important. And obviously you will get the contact details of me or Tazos, and in order to be free to contact us, because very important to get different opinion from different market forces. And stay tuned, because we likely have several workshops in order to continue to get more feedback and to highlight the issues. So thank you again. Thanks for the participants, so to the panelists, so Tom, Stuart, Peter, Francesca, obviously thanks to Water Europe, also Anka and the team, and Anna for the help for this preparation of the webinar. Okay, so have a good day now. Bye-bye.